Good morning. It's time for our daily devotion. Did you know today that if you're a believer in Jesus, if you are following Him, if your life is committed to the Jesus lifestyle, did you know that you're living upside down? You are living in a world that is upside down, and you're living right side up. But for all practical purposes, you're trying to exist in an upside down world. And that makes it tough. I think one of the reasons why those of us who have committed our lives to follow Jesus, one of the reasons we have such a difficult time in figuring out exactly what that looks like is because we're disoriented in this world. We're trying to live right side up in an upside down world. You know, when I was not too old, maybe 12, 13 years old, we went to an amusement park, and I took a little trip through a fun house. And this fun house was not like others that I'd been to where they have the Hall of Mirrors and that sort of thing. But in this particular fun house, everything was arranged so that it was upside down. So you walked into a room and the table and chairs were hanging from the ceiling. Things on the shelf were upside down. The rugs were on the ceiling, and or what appeared to be the ceiling. But what it really was an upside down floor. You were really walking on the ceiling. But everything was upside down. And I remember walking through that, even at that age, and not paying particular attention to the spiritual implications of things like that. I remember walking through that particular funhouse on that day thinking, this just doesn't seem right. This is all wrong. And I really do believe that if we look at the words of Jesus, what we see is that He's asking us to walk through this life turned upside down from the way the rest of the world is turned. For example, He said, if you want to be first, you have to be last. And those who are first will be last. And those who are last will be first. That doesn't make any sense to us. It's completely turned around from our conventional wisdom and the way that this world operates, and yet it is truth and everything else is an untruth. Jesus said if you want to receive, what you need to do is give what you have away. He said if you give, it'll be pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Well, that's an upside down kind of way to think. The way this world thinks is if you want to have more, you have to keep more, you have to hoard more, you have to spend less and accumulate more. And the more you accumulate, the richer you'll be. But in Jesus' world, the less we have, the richer we are. The more we give away, the richer we are. And so it's upside down from the way the rest of the world thinks. Now the problem is, for most of us, we only live in a spiritual world a few hours a week. Now let's admit it. Most of us have a different lifestyle outside of church than we do inside, around church people and Christian people, as opposed to away from them. And so we live in this world in 40-hour a week jobs. We live in this world in a school system. We live in this world in a family relationship. All of those things in our life are usually based on the upside down kingdom of the world. When we try to turn our lives right side up by following Jesus, everything else looks out of skew. It looks out of whack. It doesn't look like it makes any sense. Going back and forth between these two kinds of worlds makes it very difficult to live for Jesus. So what do we do about that? Well, here's what we do. We ask God to help us every day, 7 days a week, every waking hour, to be oriented toward His kingdom rather than the world's kingdom. The longer you live in a house where everything is upside down, the more you get used to it. And pretty soon, you're not surprised by the table hanging from what looks like the ceiling, but is really an upside down floor. You're not surprised by the fact that the things in the house where you think they ought to be one place or another, you're not surprised by that because you become oriented to it. What we need to do as followers of Jesus is to become oriented to the kingdom of God and understand that it is right the way Jesus sees it. It is right the way Jesus teaches it. It is right the way He asks us to live. Everything else is wrong. That's what we need to do in order to live in the kingdom, to love people instead of hate them, to give instead of hoard, to be willing to let others be first instead of ourselves, and to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. So, in this upside down world, go make it a great day today, and I will see you next time.
Rock of Ages.